Air. We're going to bring in Southwest Air's chairman and CEO, Gary Kelly. And before I bring in Gary, I want to say that he had a loss, and that is not Southwest's way, which means that this industry is doing something that I'm sure he hasn't seen. So, Gary, I'm going to give you the floor because you do not have losses. That's just something that Southwest doesn't have.
Well, yeah, morning, Jim. Yeah, these are obviously extraordinary times, and we had a great first quarter going. We had a very strong January, very strong February. Saw no signs of COVID-19 issues until the end of February, and the drop in bookings, the increase in cancellations, the drop in traffic in March was just breathtaking. So here we are. The good news is that Southwest is very well prepared. We had excess liquidity coming into the crisis. We had the lowest level of debt to total capital in our history. Over $10 billion of unencumbered airplanes available. So, we're prepared, and you have to be, especially in this industry. You have to be prepared for the unexpected. And this meets that definition. This is a real challenge.
Okay, so you've got 20% load factor and estimated daily cash burn of 30 to 35 million. What can you make so that we all come back and fly? I know that the employees are wearing masks, but I want to fly Southwest, and I want to fly Southwest, and I want to be able to tell my wife, I'm flying Southwest. You don't have to worry about me. I'm not getting COVID for Southwest. What has to happen to make it so that I feel like that's the case?
I think a lot of things are going to happen for, the country to come back to life, much less air travel. And then, obviously, we and the federal government have a role to play in this. But I think people ultimately, if they're going to travel, they need to have something to be able to do when they get there. So Disney World needs to open back up. Restaurants need to open back up. So you have those kinds of things. Then people need to feel safe, and we'll need to do our part there. So we'll need to protect our employees. We'll need to disinfect our airports and our airplanes, and our customers will need to know what we're doing, and they'll need to feel comfortable with that. So all those things, I think, are very far along in terms of being able to deploy those kinds of procedures. And then as far as customers go, we'll certainly we'll follow CDC guidelines. We'll certainly encourage customers, as an example, to wear a mask. We'll have PPE kits that we'll offer to customers. We'll have social distancing at the airports and on the airplanes. We won't have airplanes that are booked full. Certainly not an issue right now, but in the coming months, we'll want customers to be comfortable that there'll be spacing. So we don't assign seats, but we won't book the airplane full. So I think you can assume that all the middle seats would be open. If I'm traveling with my granddaughter and she wants to sit next to me in the middle seat, I think obviously we won't prohibit that. But there are a number of things like that need to be done. We'll need to work with the federal government in terms of screening customers to make sure, for example, that you don't have someone getting on the airplane that has a fever. And I think that that's going to be very important. So we'll need to do what the rest of the country is doing, quite frankly. And this too shall pass. It's just a matter of obviously fighting through this pandemic and getting to the other side. It
does sound like you're doing everything you can. Boeing MAX, Phil LeBeau talked about it earlier. When you think it'll be, it looks like it's now October 30th. Can you call Boeing and say, you know what, guys, here's some thoughts about COVID that you could do. Ultraviolet lighting or making some sort of surface that is less likely to be able to keep COVID on. I mean, if they're going to sit there and not be able to get it approved, even though I think it should be approved, and I offered to fly it, I don't care. I think it's the best airplane ever made. But I do think that maybe they could make, if they're just sitting there, could you make it a little more anti-COVID?
I don't think that that's reasonable here in the short term. There's just too long of a development and certification cycle associated with that. So obviously it's taking as long as it's taking because of issues that they're dealing with. So But those are all good ideas and all things that I think will need to be explored in the future. We were, as a world, we just weren't prepared for this pandemic. And I think that there's tremendous learnings from this, and we need to be better prepared the next time around. And hopefully it won't be for another another century, like the Spanish flu of 1918. Obviously, we've had issues in between, but yeah, this is a doozy. So all those are great ideas, and all those need to be fully vetted.
Gary, it's David. Yeah, it is certainly a doozy, and some of those things you described in terms of new ways that you'll board passengers sound onerous and potentially expensive, which gets me to your financial condition. Can you update us on the government money that you are taking, how that's going to work, and when you look towards the fall, whether you think you're going to be able to need yet more money, as some other airlines potentially may be?
The CARES Act provides two basic programs. One is a loan program, and the other one is styled payroll support. So we have applied for the payroll support part of the program. Our portion of that is $3.3 billion, and that is funded in tranches over a 4-month period. So so far we've received half of that, or $1.6 billion. 948 of that is in the form of a loan, an unsecured loan that has to be paid back, and then the rest is a grant. So the obligations that the airlines have, or that we have, is to have no involuntary furloughs of our employees through September the 30th. And then there are other conditions besides that, but that's the primary one. The loan program, the application for that is due this week, and our pro rata share of that is $2.8 billion. It's a secured loan, and it also comes with warrants, 10% coverage in terms of warrants. So we'll apply for that, and we'll have until September 30th to decide whether we want to draw down those funds. It also comes with restrictions and conditions. So we have $9.3 billion in cash as of last Friday, and we'll be raising more money, is our intention. It just doesn't pay to not have enough cash in an environment like this. And as I mentioned earlier, we started the year in a very, very strong position, and we want to make sure that we sustain that. The cash burn number that you mentioned is really the spending, and it doesn't include revenues. So hopefully April will be the worst. My rough estimate is that we'll burn about $900 million this month, and hopefully it gets better in May, and then better in June, and then hopefully remarkably better in July. Obviously, we can't sustain this kind of cash burn indefinitely. So I don't know that I would say that it's so much after September. The CARES Act doesn't solve all of our problems. So we'll need to reduce that cash burn, and that's probably a combination of continuing to reduce our flight schedule, so that we're not incurring the operating expenses associated with the flights, as well as just generating more traffic and more revenue. And we'll just have to see, where we are after September the 30th. If the traffic doesn't materialize, then there's no choice but to downsize the airline. And, it's just premature to make those judgments yet. But I'm really interested to see where we are in the June, July, August time period and see how traffic is responding. But our president, Tom Nealon, we've tasked him with the job of creating strategic plans based on various recovery scenarios. And so we've got to be prepared for the worst in this environment, because the traffic levels are next to zero at this point.
Gary, you talk about the number of things that need to go right, Disney reopening and so forth. A lot of people are talking about the airport process itself. TSA, baggage, airport concessions. How would you characterize their ability to implement procedures that also affirm confidence?
Oh, I think everybody will be in a position where they can implement procedures. You go to grocery stores and gasoline stations and whatnot, and people have already put in place social distancing techniques and screening techniques. So all of that, I think, has to be done. I don't think it has to be done into perpetuity. I think it's, once this pandemic has worked its way through, you look back at the Spanish flu of 1918, it was followed by the Roaring '20s. So I don't think we have to assume that the world has changed forevermore, but we certainly need to do everything we can to defeat the virus, and that will include these kinds of measures here, certainly, for the near future.
Gary, one of the things that's great about capitalism is that the companies that are incredibly well run, with good labor relations, sound financials, never have losses in any year, should triumph over the companies that maybe have these big losses all the time or go bankrupt. And your industry is regarded as an essential industry, so you never seem to be able to overtake those who were bad actors, so to speak, when we all grew up and were learning about business. Does it bother you that you play by the rules and it doesn't work?
Well, Herb Kelleher used to joke that, we have to beat these guys 5 times, so it is humorous in a way, the way you ask the question. But, there have been Jim, lots of failures over the past 40 years. The industry in, post-recession, 2008 and 9 has actually been very healthy. So it took bankruptcy with the legacy carriers to arrive at that. But, we have stronger competitors today than we have had in the past. But I get your point. Nonetheless, every industry is going to have winners and losers. And what we bring into this, in addition to our preparedness, is great customer service. Our folks do a marvelous job of running the operation, and we have a low-cost structure. And, what we haven't talked about is just, in addition to making sure that customers feel safe and comfortable returning to airports and airplanes, they're also going to be looking for a low fare. This is a low-fare world, and we're a low-cost, low-fare company. We've got a great route network throughout the United States, so we just want to make sure that we manage through this very carefully. We don't want to be too cautious, but we certainly don't want to be overly aggressive and put ourselves into bankruptcy. So we have a very deep leadership team here. I'm very, very proud of them. In addition to all of our employees are doing a great job. So we're as prepared as anybody can be for this crisis, and we're determined to come out on the other side of this very healthy and very strong.
Well, Gary, I bet you do. It's Gary Kelly, CEO of Southwest, symbol LUV. Always great to see you, sir. Thank you.
It's great to be with you all.